Enoch described in the Bible the four quarters of the world, which is what we have on the screen here. Let me get rid of this Aquarius thing. This is what Enoch described as the four quarters of the world. We went over this one right up top right here. This is what was divided into three sections: the dwelling of men, the vast oceans, and blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, the garden of righteousness, which is right here, accessible by accessing this quarter of the world. Okay? But if we look at what Enoch says about the other quarters, the first quarter is called the east because it is the first. Well, what does that mean? To me, that means that this quarter is where life began. This is the first. This is where life first was. Okay? Now, we know from other presentations that I've done that the earth is approximately 6,000 years old. Okay? There was a flood about 4,000 years ago. Christ walked the earth about 2,000 years ago. But if this was the first, and it took 2,000 years, a great year it's about 2,100 years. So let's round that off and say 2,000. If it took 2,100 years or 2,000 years to go from the east to the south, because this is the way that the magnetic pole is rotating, you can see these red lines on the screen right here in the circle. If it took 2,000 years about to get from the east to the south, that would be 2,000 years right about here, or in the south 2,000 years. Okay? Let's look at the south. Let's look at what Enoch has to say about the south. And the first quarter is called the east, because it is the first, and the second, the south, because the Most High will descend there. What does Enoch mean about that? Well, the Most High are the smart people. The Most High are the ones that have the means to get from this quarter, which is now freezing, to this quarter. They'll descend there. They'll descend there because they can no longer occupy these lands because your magnetic pole is shifting. It took about 2,000 years to get here. Okay? That whole journey from east to south, the first quarter over here to the second quarter over here, is about 2,000, 2,100 years. All right? The Most High will descend there. Let's see what he says about the next quarter. And the west quarter is named the diminished. Why? Well, I think for a couple reasons. Number one, now you're asking people to not only go from the first quarter in the east where life began, but to the second quarter, which it was very hard to get from here to here, especially back then. Now you're going over here to the west, another 2,000, 2,100 years later. Well, that's where we are now. Well, actually we're up here now. But this is diminished because, first of all, there's not a lot of lands. If you look at the lands down here in this quarter, in the south quarter, there are much more lands than there are in the west. So diminished can mean a couple things. If you look at the percentage of land down here, it is mostly land. If you look at percentage of land over here in the west versus water, it is diminished. It is big time diminished. And I think also the population diminished big time. So if we started over here in the east, and it took about 2,000 years to get here, then another 2,000 years to get here, then another 2,000 years to get here, well, lo and behold, ladies and gentlemen, that's 6,000 years. And if you look at Kent Hovind's presentation on why he believes that the earth is 6,000 years old, it lines up perfectly with Enoch. The first quarter is called the east because it is the first. The second, the south, because the Most High will descend there. And the west is named the diminished. Then, of course, we get to the fourth quarter, named the north, divided into three parts. The first of them is the dwelling of men. What I think Enoch meant by that is the lands. This is the first area of the three, the dwelling of men. The second contains seas and water, and the abysses and forests and rivers. Well, that's this area, right in here. Lemuria, you got New Zealand up here, Australia here, Lemuria no longer there. This is seas, this is waters, this is forests, this is the abysses and clouds and darkness, because no one's there. And the third part is called the garden of righteousness, right here, where everything rotates around. This is where we are now. We are in the fourth quarter of the fourth rotation of Earth's magnetic pole. We started in the east. It was the first. The Most High descended to the south. And even though with that descent and all of that population, we diminished in the west. And those that were left in the west found their way over to the north. And unfortunately, the people that ended up in the north were very bad people, and they rewrote our history to keep all of this from us. You live in a very large electromagnetic terrarium. And this terrarium is covered by a firmament, which is mentioned in the Bible some 200 times. And the Bible talks about the edges of the world many times. Enoch talks about the four quarters of the world. What you are going through right now, when you look at this is natural. This cannot be stopped. This has already happened, and it will happen again and again and again every 2,000 years, about 2,156 years. There's nothing anyone could do about this. The sun and the moon are bound by the shift in the magnetic pole. It is as natural as night and day, and nothing can stop it. We, ladies and gentlemen, are in a battle for Aquarius. Aquarius is what happens in the next shift. We are currently here, and the next shift is happening. And it's happening much quicker than we thought it would. And that's why they're panicking with climate change. That's why they're trying to dim the sun. Nothing will work. It's moving. You can't stop it from moving. This is the one they're afraid of. This one, yeah, a little bit. Because you've got some lands over here that are going to be unoccupiable. This one. This is the one they're worried about. They don't have a plan for this. And the forces that be, the forces that are fighting right now, are fighting for the age of Aquarius. It's the battle for Aquarius to get into this next quarter, which is right here. This is Aquarius right here. The people that used to live over here where we live now, what happens to them? What are we going to find in all of these lands? What will we find over here? Will we find new buildings? New technology? Because it's happened before. When the shift happened here, in all of our lands that we occupy now, started becoming available, we found all sorts of buildings. We found all sorts of stuff. What will we find when we get to the south? Who's going to make it? Will the Cabal still be in control and allow everyone to die before they could descend? We don't know. We don't know. And that's the scary part.